Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits using technology. Joining me today is Eli Vander Giessen to talk about TechSoup and, hopefully, if we have time, volunteering. Eli, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. Delighted to be here, Alexander.
Welcome to the show. For those who have not heard you before, can you give me a brief introduction of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Eli Vander Giessen. I'm a community manager at TechSoup, which is a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits get and use technology. And within that, I do a lot of volunteer management and event production.
So Eli, what is your superhero origin story? How did you get started working with nonprofits?
I just volunteered myself into the sector. I was going to a summer folk festival, like a big outdoor show. Couldn't afford it as someone who was 19, so I volunteered and got super duper addicted to being involved with the team that built this festival, eventually volunteering about 100 hours in a summer. And so one day they said, well, why don't you just come be our student for the next year, be the summer student on a government grant. And 7 years later, I was still around. And through there, basically, I had my crash course in volunteer and community management.
There was something to the story about David Suzuki as well. Where does he come into play?
Totally. For the Canadians, this is going to mean something for you. For the Americans, you're going to be like, I don't know. So I got involved basically through that summer job. I started doing event production. And one day I got an email meant for my boss who was out of town saying, we're looking for someone who can put David Suzuki, who was an environmentalist in Canada, think of him a little bit like a mix between Al Gore and the guy who does all the nature shows in front of the UK. His name I suddenly blanked on. Anyways, so he's an environmentalist, and they said, put him on a bus, take him across the country. And because I had just done a very similar piece of work with Canadian Idol, helping sort of manage their audition tour, they hired me up, and through there, I basically did this cross-country bus tour and spent a lot of time trapped on a bus with the leaders of this organization, talking about how they could engage their community and volunteers. And at the end of this tour, they brought me in to get more involved with their volunteer management. Through there, I got super involved with the technology world because I had this opportunity to say, where's the database? How do I email my crew? And they were like, I don't know, figure it out. So I went and figured it out.
David Suzuki actually is a pretty big name in Canada. And I don't know what the name of the UK person you were thinking of, but I would almost put him between, as you mentioned, Al Gore and Neil deGrasse Tyson, in a sense of very passionate about the environment, very pronounced figure in Canada, and he's been doing this for a very long time. He's an icon, basically. Did you get a chance to meet him?
Yes, I spent years in his office, with David. And the person I'm thinking of is David Attenborough, of course, who does all the nature documentaries. And so think of him as sort of like this public education figure with a strong activist bent. And so we spent lots of time basically, working together, creating videos, building out a bit of like the digital infrastructure that the organization needed to support first the volunteer management, and then as other things like social media came along, more broader communication strategies.
And you mentioned that you said you were told you have to figure out the technology, or you have to figure out how to do things. Based on your background, was it something that you were easily able to do, or did you have to figure it out as you went along?
I was totally faking it every step of the way. There was one person who sort of led web and design, but as the internet exploded, suddenly the demand for just email campaigns, digital, exploded around it. So I kind of stepped into that role to sort of help them figure that out. I didn't have any technology or frankly marketing background. All I had really was curiosity. And so I started just reading everything I could find. And eventually I started going to the local Tech for Good meetup that had started up about 6 months earlier. And that is really where I met all the people whose brains I'm still picking 15 years later.
That's awesome. Fake it till you make it. There's something to be said about that. Really, if you know you've got the capacity to do something, you shouldn't let your current knowledge limit yourself on what you're capable of doing in the future. And it's sometimes hard to project yourself saying, I can do this. I can see myself at some point in the future being able to do this. It's just not, that moment is not yet, or has not yet arrived. Obviously, you don't want to fake something you're incapable of ever doing. Let's say, surgery, for example. You wouldn't want to say, I can be a surgeon in 6 months for something like that. But if it's something within your realm of conceptual idea, I love it. Do it.
Yeah. And I'm never going to be the skilled person on a team. I've always been sort of more in the production manager, person who's going to do the coordinator, the person who's going to say, like, here's the goal we want to get to. Let's bring all the skills together to actually get ourselves to done.
There's something to be said, though, about knowing how the wheels work, and that some of the underlying technology and underlying processes work. That because you worked your way through that, you know approximately how long things take or how complicated things are, even at the high level. So I'm curious then, tell me a bit more about TechSoup. What does this organization do for those that don't know TechSoup?
So when I first got involved with the nonprofit technology community, one of the first things people pointed me towards was TechSoup. And I'll admit to you, I immediately thought it was a scam because it just sounded way too good to be true. Basically, what they said is, you can go to this website, fill out a quick form proving that you're a nonprofit, and from there, they will essentially give you free and deeply discounted software. But it's a real thing. So TechSoup is a nonprofit that exists to help other nonprofits get and use technology. And we do that at scale through our partners. So we work with about 120 technology companies to help manage their discount and donation programs. So Google or Microsoft or Adobe or Cisco or Zoom, all of them rely on TechSoup to basically administer their donation and discount programs to nonprofits. And so through that, we've now served 1.4 million nonprofits and saved the sector about $19 billion in software and service fees.
So it's kind of like a group discount that you get that you're able to apply to all the nonprofits that are part of TechSoup?
That's right. It's a bit of a negotiated deal. So you would say, oh, Microsoft wants to give away licenses at, say, a 90% discount to nonprofits, but Microsoft's lawyers say, wait, let's prove that the people we're actually giving software to are nonprofits. And so it used to be that those companies would go and try and do that validation themselves, but it was time consuming and it was imprecise. And it was really hard for those companies to say, do that same kind of validation in Mozambique or to do that in Guatemala. And so what TechSoup does is say, let's basically take this validation, this proof of nonprofit status. We do it once, but then you can use that exact same validation proof for any of the other software requests with any of those 100 plus partners. And so that's how TechSoup is able to scale and also just help those companies who want to give and support the nonprofit sector globally actually do that in a way that they can make it functionally work and meet all their legal due diligences.
If it's a global company, how do you manage multi-language type of scenarios? Like if there's documents that are provided by the local government to indicate that they are not a nonprofit, I mean, if it's in a different language other than English or maybe Spanish, how do you manage that?
So TechSoup is actually not really one organization, but a global network of organizations. Knowing that we weren't able to support nonprofits in every country in their language, in their time zone, we didn't really know the legal situations. So what we have done is partnered with existing organizations in either individual countries or regions who basically, in an almost franchise style model, deliver the TechSoup service to nonprofits in their countries. So if you're in Australia, you're actually going to Connecting Up, who delivers the TechSoup service. Or if you're in the UK, you're going to go to the Technology Trust, who again delivers TechSoup's software and discount program in addition to other things they already do. So that's how we've been able to make sure that we offer like relevant in language, in culture support in every country.
Getting a bit into the weeds, actually, before we get much further, because I still have some questions about that, I wanted to know, how is it that you started to work with TechSoup? What was it about it that attracted you so much to the organization that you said, I need to work here?
Well, just like I did with my origin story of how did I get into the nonprofit sector, I also did the same thing with TechSoup, which is I volunteered myself into the role. So I became one of those nonprofit Tech for Good meetup leaders, which are sort of affiliated with TechSoup. And after doing that role for a couple of years as a volunteer, eventually TechSoup tapped me on the shoulder and said, do you want to support the other leaders in our network doing the same thing? So that was my entry into TechSoup. But I was scheming and plotting to get into TechSoup because it's such an exciting organization, because where else do you get to serve and support more than 1 million nonprofits globally? The ability for TechSoup to make good happen at scale is super exciting. And that's what brought me to the organization. That's what keeps me at the organization, is to say, I'm not just working at a nonprofit where I'm serving, 2,000 clients. Instead, I'm working at a nonprofit where ultimately I'm helping the sector save billions of dollars.
Yeah, that is actually really, really awesome. I mean, it scales like I've never heard of before. So that's really impressive. I'm curious then, is there a particular client that is well suited for TechSoup, or is it basically any nonprofit anywhere in the world?
TechSoup will support you in every country and territory in the world, with the exception of like 3 or 4 places where the US government doesn't allow it. I'm thinking of like Syria, North Korea, Cuba, basically. But otherwise, as long as you are in your own country, registered as a nonprofit charity, church, or library, or your local equivalent in your country, you are probably eligible for the TechSoup program. Each country and each organization type will have different packages of software and services available at discount or donation. So it's going to vary a little bit. So the catalog in Canada is going to be different from the catalog in the UK, but a lot of the core offerings are going to be available globally.
That's a good segue actually to the next question is, so what kind of tech can nonprofits expect to receive? You mentioned that their catalogs are different. I imagine there's some common themes and common tech that, Gmail, for example, maybe being one of them. But what other things that you see commonly found across most countries? And then maybe a few just specific ones in countries, just out of curiosity to see, what do other countries have that we don't have, for example?
Yeah, so the specifics of the catalog, I'll be honest, I can't speak too deeply into that at a country level. But I would say what you're going to find if you're a nonprofit and you go to TechSoup's website is free or discounted versions of lots of the core software you're probably already using. So obviously the Microsoft 365 suite and all the related software, they're in the TechSoup catalog. Google for Nonprofits, which includes things like both, the Google Suite, email hosting and all that stuff, as well as the Google Nonprofit Ad Program, which brings $10,000 of free ad credits to nonprofits every month, is also a core thing you're going to find there. Or maybe you're needing a project management software. Asana's there right now for nonprofits. There's also other kinds of software to solve specific needs. So maybe you need to get all of your volunteers to sign contracts with you. DocuSign's there available at a discount. Or maybe you need to solve your accounting problems. Intuit QuickBooks is there as well. So those are all the kinds of solutions. But just dig into there because there'll be more than 100 different options. Everything from Adobe Creative Suite to Zoom, the software we're using to record this conversation right now.
I have to ask, because you didn't mention it, what about a CRM?
So there's a couple CRM options in there. The one I use every day is actually is HubSpot. And so that's one of the offerings right now within there. But there's also some more donation specific offerings, things like Little Green Lights as well.
Okay, so then let's talk about the sign up process for a second. So let's say there's a nonprofit somewhere in the world, they want to get involved. Maybe it's not under the TechSoup brand. Where would they have to go, or where would they should go to be able to start signing up and getting all this, getting access?
Well, luckily there's one friendly place to start. So you go to TechSoup.global, and then from there you will select from the dropdown your country or territory. And so that will then automatically redirect you into your specific local instance of TechSoup. And once you're there, the step one is to go and create your free account. And that's a pretty quick and simple process. Essentially, what you need to have is your basic info, an uploaded copy, probably a PDF of your like legal registration from the government for your organization. And it's also really handy to have the budget from your most recent annual report. And that can be so pretty high level, just like what is, the overall income of my organization and a couple top level categories. So the things you would normally see in an annual report would meet those requirements. And then from there, once you've uploaded it, give yourself about 2 weeks to have your application go through the process to get approved. And then once you're there, you're good for the next 2 years until you have to do a re-certification.
I imagine there's some local discrepancies as well, right? Various countries might need additional information or less information depending on where you are.
Very much so. And that's part of TechSoup's secret sauce is we've actually have a team of lawyers who have gone through and created what they call an equivalency of the US 501c3 for all of the countries and territories across our network. And so each site will say specifically, here's the kind of documentation you will need. And so it's going to vary by every country because every legal jurisdiction is different. But TechSoup has tried to sort of simplify that by saying, once you're certified as a equivalent of a 501c3 or a nonprofit, then you can use that to go through our catalog, request software. And we also can use that same certification with granting organizations. So say you're like the MacArthur Foundation and you want to donate to an organization in Zambia. The US government basically needs to say to you, like, can you prove that they are the equivalent of a nonprofit in their country? And because TechSoup has already done that work, those foundations can use that same kind of validation to quickly meet their own due diligence requirements.
What happens after the 2 years? You mentioned it's valid for 2 years. Is there a renewal process or do you have to go through a requalification?
Yeah, you'll need to go through and basically re-upload some of those core documents just to prove that you are still a nonprofit. Just like the initial application, all of this is always free. But it's basically us just making sure that we have up-to-date data for each nonprofit in our database.
And then once you've been approved, a nonprofit has access to a catalog. Is it just technologies or is it partners as well? Is there any kind of processes or documentation or any kind of help that can make them, do better, do more better?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that's quite English, but is it more than just technology or is there something more? Yeah.
So TechSoup historically started with software, discount and donation to our partners. We've now expanded that catalog to now include services. Some of those are going to be services, what we call like quick microservices. So you might just say like, here, TechSoup, let me pay you $50 or whatever. Set up my Office 365 account, transfer my emails over from like the Gmail addresses we've been using historically. Or it might be a bigger service like I need a Salesforce initial assessment and a plan for how we're actually going to do this CRM implementation. That would be done through partners, to TechSoup is partnered with. Those services right now are mostly in the US, but are starting to be expanded out to other territories. The other things we offer here in TechSoup land is all the support you need to succeed with technology. And that it ranges from everything from a forum to free webinars that are available to you as nonprofits, or it can be access to our like self-paced courses platform where nonprofits can sort of go through and take a course, figure out how they can solve their day-to-day problems. Or if they're looking for more community-based support, that's where they show up in my TechSoup Connect program, which is a global network of tech for good meetups run by volunteers. And that's a great way for you to hear local case studies around how your fellow nonprofits are using technology. And also often those events are going to be in your own language, in your own time zone.
If I understood correctly, there are some services that you, TechSoup, yourselves provide, like a migration to a new email system. And there's other ones that you lean on partners that you connect with, either locally or I guess you said mostly in the US, to do more advanced stuff, like you said, the CRM implementation. Is that right?
That's right. So there's a broad range from a help desk that you can get access to for one-off requests for help, like my printer's acting out, help me, down to full managed IT offerings, and those are delivered through partner organizations that TechSoup has selected that have real expertise in working with nonprofits.
So if you could speak a bit more about that partnership, how would a partner or like a CRM implementation person or a Microsoft or anybody else who's an expert in that particular product, how would they become a partner with TechSoup to be able to provide these services for these nonprofits?
So there is a number of ways to come at that. Largely, this is sort of much more of a org-to-org kind of relationship. But I would suggest if you go to the TechSoup.us website, there's under the services menu, you'll see there's something called Consultant Connection. And that's where we've built out a bit of a directory where we help connect nonprofits to vetted consultants in their community.
And then the TechSoup Connect, you said, is more about forums and meetups. So it's actually being able to get, would it be, let's say, I'll phrase it as a question more than a statement. If a nonprofit's looking for certain volunteers to help them with an event on a particular day, is TechSoup Connect a place that they can get those kinds of volunteers?
I would say TechSoup Connect is not a general volunteer matching platform. It's not like a volunteer match or a similar platform. Rather, it's a place for people to go and participate in existing events that have been scheduled. So often our volunteers are going to be posting an event on a topic like, how do you figure out Google Analytics and like what are the reports you should pay attention to? They might schedule a 1-hour workshop in their community around that. And by participating in those events, there is lots of informal matching with people who are looking either for new careers, new jobs in the sector, or are looking to volunteer for a local organization. But I would say it's not the primary thing we do at TechSoup. We don't have a volunteer matching platform, and we let other partners in the community take that role on instead.
Okay, but there is a forum part you mentioned as well. So if there's any kind of advice, there is a place where people can share ideas and best practices, for example, and not just globally, but actually locally as well, I imagine.
That's right. Yeah, the forum is a great place for that. In fact, once a week or so, we've got what we often call a donate your brain, where we have like a question that comes from the community and we help crowdsource a solution as forum members to figure out how do you solve that technology problem.
So I'm curious then, what is the price then for a nonprofit to join TechSoup?
Well, as I said, it sounded like a scam when I first discovered it because joining TechSoup is totally free. Participating in our webinars, totally free to attendees. The forums, totally free to attendees. But there are, once you become an approved TechSoup member, once you've gone through the validation process, there are then some associated fees that TechSoup uses to cover our expenses of running the organization, managing these discount and donation programs.
I imagine it's through the partnerships as well, right? If I'm even for myself, for example, if I wanted to be a partner of TechSoup providing my services, I imagine there's a percentage commission, something referral fees that are associated to me being able to contribute my services.
Yeah, TechSoup is a really interesting nonprofit in that it's really structured much more like a social enterprise. So the majority of the funds that TechSoup receives are basically coming from administration fees that we're charging a player in our ecosystem. So if you go to our website and request, say, access to just the discounted rate for Adobe Creative Suite, we're going to charge you a small fee to basically unlock that discount. And that covers our costs of administering the discount program. Other things in our TechSoup ecosystem are actually paid for not by the nonprofit, but for the company. So if you go to Google's website and you say, I want access to Google for nonprofit, they're like, that's awesome. But halfway through the application program process, they will top up a form saying, before you finish this, we need to prove that you're a nonprofit. And the way you do that is you go back to your TechSoup account and pull out like a random code that is used that's unique for your organization to basically prove that you are a valid nonprofit. And through that whole process, the nonprofit doesn't pay any fees. Instead, the cost of administering the approval is borne in that case by Google. So that's one of the other ways. And then the third way, as you talked about, is sometimes TechSoup will play a role to be a bit like a reseller. So we may well work with a partner who delivers a service, and basically for helping bring that discounted offering to nonprofits, there is either like a one-off or recurring fee, depending on how the relationship was structured, to sort of make that discounted offering available to nonprofits and the validation behind it self-sustaining.
You also mentioned that for nonprofits in the US, there is a fairly extensive network of partners that they can find, and you're expanding to other countries. This kind of sounds similar to another platform I've heard of before, and we actually had the CEO join us, and it's called Pond. And I'm curious to know, how would you differentiate yourself between Pond and TechSoup?
I think we play in the same pool of water, but that we have a slightly different, maybe larger role. So Pond is really based around referral fees. So a nonprofit goes into their marketplace and says, I want to work with this company or this consultant. And then the company basically pays a fee back to Pond for basically bringing them this new business. TechSoup does a little bit of that too. But the Pond model doesn't support those companies that don't actually want to charge the nonprofits anything. Some companies just want to offer their software for free to the nonprofit sector, but they have to do that due diligence, the validation process, to make sure that they're giving to a nonprofit that's valid in that country, that they're giving to a nonprofit that hasn't already received a donation before in that same year. So a good example of that is something like Google for nonprofits, or Adobe's new offering, Adobe Express. Those are available at no charge to nonprofits, and therefore there is no referral fee. So they wouldn't fit into something like the Pond model.
Well, once then a nonprofit is in the system, they're using it, and they're having challenges. Is there any kind of challenges either using the platform itself, challenges working with a partner, trying to figure out how to make heads or tails maybe out of the catalog? Is there anywhere that they can go to for support?
Absolutely. TechSoup is not going to leave you hanging. We're a nonprofit like yourselves, and we know that sometimes you just need a bit of a helping hand, because most of us did not come to our organizations because we were passionate about technology. We are there because we're passionate about the mission. So TechSoup will support you in addition to the self-support things we talked about, which is, the online courses, going into the forums and asking questions, or attending some of our webinars or events. TechSoup has also got chat and phone support available to help you to find the right solution for your nonprofit and make sure that you're able to successfully onboard and implement those solutions. So those are some of the things that are part of your TechSoup membership, is these supports to make sure that you succeed. I think the newest thing that we're building out at TechSoup is actually a membership program that supports nonprofits a bit more deeply. So we've created this community called Quad that brings together some custom, deeper content, and also includes more direct access and support from our staff. So as Quad members, which is a $200 a year membership for up to 10 members of your organization, you get access to our dedicated community, a knowledge base where we're building out resources and templates like, say, you're a food charity and you are looking for, say, a sample spreadsheet to help you manage volunteers at your events. Templates like that have been created and shared within the Quad community, as well as there's unique member events, reports, and how-tos available within that community as well. And so that's one of the newest things we're building out at TechSoup, where we offer deeper support, including a needs assessment and a dedicated member support person for just your organization. So you're no longer just calling a random person when you call up the TechSoup support line, but rather you're talking to Aaron. And you've been talking with the same person for the last year, and they deeply understand the needs of your organization and can help recommend the right services and solutions for your organization, both in and outside of the TechSoup catalog.
Yeah, that sounds like an account manager, which is very useful. So aside from this quad and membership type thing, anything else that you would like to see or you plan to see, maybe give us advance notice of where TechSoup is going to be in the next several years?
So for TechSoup's future, what we see is a rapid expansion of more partners in our catalog. Basically, we used to have, 30 big technology companies, and we would distribute software from a warehouse in the San Francisco Bay Area and mail it out to nonprofits. Now, of course, all of that's happening online through subscription. And so TechSoup is bringing on several partners a month into our catalog. So that's the first thing. There's an expansion of offerings to nonprofits. The other major expansion we see happening over the next couple of years is an expansion in services, because the one thing we really learned as everyone moved to the cloud is lots of people are requesting licenses and then not successfully implementing and using that software. And so we see a major opportunity and gap for TechSoup to fill is helping nonprofits actually use these software licenses that they've requested through our technology partners. And so those are the two big changes we see. It's going to be around more offerings, and it's going to be around the services to actually successfully implement those solutions.
Awesome. I know I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that we might talk about volunteering, but I'm thinking now we would save this conversation for another date because there's a lot of goodies in there that I would love to get into. So I think now would be a good time just to end it. So where can people find more about you and find more about TechSoup online?
So the best place to find out more about TechSoup is to go to TechSoup.global. No matter where you are in the world, you'll be redirected to your local flavor of TechSoup. As for me, I am, to my great shame, one of the LinkedIn power users out there in the world. So my recommendation is if you want to follow some of the work that I'm doing with its a focus on community and volunteer management, you can hunt down me by my name on LinkedIn.
Eli, thank you so much for joining me today.
Such a pleasure. Delighted to nerd out about this thing, TechSoup, that I've been around for 15 years now, both as a volunteer and staffer.
I mean, you're right, though. It does sound almost like a scam, and I'm really impressed that you are able to offer all of these great benefits to nonprofits for free. It does sound like a scam. So I'm really happy we had this conversation today.
Delighted to have this chance to talk with you. And again, if you have not yet created your TechSoup account, it's totally free. It'll take you 10 minutes. And it will open up a whole world of software savings and service savings for your nonprofit.
We'll add all the links in the show notes below. All right, thanks again. That's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me in the next Agents of Nonprofit.